sub that we will need to adopt, and then the bill. So, Senator, if you'll go ahead and explain your bill, the sub, and then we'll go through the mechanics of getting it in the right position to get it out of here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again for allowing me to come back. That was quick. It wasn't next week quick, so I really appreciate this committee. This is a simple bill. This bill is dealing with organizations called CERTs, Community Emergency Response Teams. And these CERTs are like volunteer fire departments in a lot of rural areas that goes out in storms and help search and rescue and maybe sit up for FEMA, for staging on storms, and people have fires. And so sometimes when they're out on search and rescue, these search may run across a body. They may need to give mouth to mouth or do something. So the bill gave them some immunity. And in the sub, we worked it out with trial lawyers based on immunity and what they want to make sure that they were certified by FEMA to do the work that they do. So that's what the sub does, is just make sure that those CERT teams are purely certified to do the work that they do out there in the community. And I would like to offer I'm sorry.
I got a motion from Senator Hatcher to adopt your sub and a second from Senator Kelly. Are there any questions on the sub? Okay.
No question.
Very good. Clerk, if you'll call the roll, we're adopting the sub.
Senator Albritton, Senator Carnley, Senator Coleman,
Aye.
Senator Gedger, Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Kelly, Senator Coleman Madison,
Aye.
Senator Chambliss, Senator Elliott.
Aye. Okay. The sub is adopted, and we're on the bill. Are there questions for the bill sponsor? I have a motion by Senator Carnley and a second from everywhere. We're going to say Linda Coleman Madison. With the second, is the previous roll acceptable? Any objections? Okay. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you,
We'll
Mr. President. We appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Next on the agenda is SB 129 by Senator Barfoot. Senator Barfoot, welcome to committee. If we can, I always like to say, hey, here's how we're going to handle this ahead of time to give everybody an idea. I'd like for you to introduce your bill. And then have some quick questions from the committee. We'll go ahead and start the public hearing on it, and if you can stick around, we may ask you to come back up afterwards to ask some more questions from the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one process question,
Yes,
if that's
ma'am.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
When we've had this committee, we've kind of been on time constraints. Today, are we under a time constraint about what time we're going to have to finish by today?
Well, eventually, but I will tell you, I am thrilled that we have a lot more time than we had last time, yesterday. So I see a conflict with me at 1:30 when I have to present a bill downstairs. There may be other members that have conflicts, but I intend to take a good bit of time to hear everybody. There are a lot of people signed up, so and somebody may want to eat lunch, but short of that, I'd like to move through the list and see if we can give folks an opportunity to say what they've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's what we've got to do. Okay, Senator Barfoot, if you would explain your bill, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, committee members. SB 129 is basically divided, as most bills are, into several different sections. I'm going to kind of go through there and hit the high points, try to answer any questions I have. The first section is the definition section, and that's an important section because it defines 9 different divisive concepts. And I'm going to talk in general terms here, so I won't have to repeat myself on these, what the class of individuals may be. Those class of individuals would be race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. And so in the definition of divisive concepts, it states that a divisive concept is any of those class of people are superior or inferior to anyone else simply based on their classification. That a person should be discriminated against or adversely affected because of their class. That moral character of a person is determined by her class. Again, when I reference class, I'm referencing those race, color, religion, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. That because of a person's class, they're inherently responsible for actions committed in the past by other members of the same class. That fault, blame, or bias should be assigned to that class based on their class. That a person should accept, acknowledge, or affirm guilt, complicity, or the need to apologize because of their class, that meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist, and that slavery and racism are aligned with the founding principles of the U.S. So it lays out what a divisive concept is pretty succinctly in those 9 different definitions. It goes further to describe what a diversity, equity, and inclusion program is, and that is, as definition, any program, class, training, seminar, or other event where participation is based solely on a person's class as defined above. Section 2 limits the prohibitions or lists the prohibitions. Those prohibitions are that the DEI program, as stated in the definition, or maintain that a sponsor cannot maintain an office of a DEI program. Director compel a student, employee, or contractor to affirm or adopt or adhere to one of those divisive concepts that's clearly laid out. Require the state agency, local board of education, or public institution to require them to attend a DEI program or training or event or exercise that advocates or requires assent to a divisive concept, requires a student, employee, or contractor share his personal views about a divisive concept, or requires a student, employee, or contractor to require them to participate in lobbying for legislation related to a divisive concept. Penalize, discriminate against a student, employee, or contractor because of a refusal to support, believe, or endorse one of those divisive concepts. Authorize expenditure of funds or apply for a grant, federal funding, or private funding for the purposes of compelling assent to one of those 9 divisive concepts. Now, as important as those prohibitions are, it's equally as important to find out what this bill does not do. That's found in Section 4. Section 4 says, nothing in this act prohibits or prevents students, faculty, organization, or associations from hosting DEI programs or discussions that may involve divisive concepts, so long as no state funds are used. It also mandates or says that nothing in this act prevents employees or contractors of a state agency, local board of local board of education, or public institution of higher ed who participate as part of their job duties, orientation, coursework, or training from responding to questions raised that pertain to divisive concepts. So we are not eliminating the discussion of those divisive concepts if it's part of their job duty or requirement. Further, it goes on. Nothing in this act prohibits the teaching of topics of historical events in a historically accurate context. I've said this before on many occasions. My mother was a history teacher. This does not prohibit in any form or fashion the teaching of history, which I don't think we do a very good job of, and I'll elaborate on that later on, because there's so many things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's happened in the state of Alabama, the United States, that we don't talk enough about. So I think that's an important part of that. This act also does not prohibit or is construed to inhibit or violate First Amendment rights of students or employees to undermine the duty of the public institution of higher education to protect the academic freedom, intellectual diversity, and free expression. That's paramount that we protect that. So that's in essence what the bill does, the definitions, and what the bill does not.
Thank you, Senator Barfoot. You've done a good job laying out the bill, what it does and doesn't do. Members, do you have questions for the sponsor? Or would we like to move right into the public hearing? Okay, so I hear you and I agree. So let's go ahead and start the public hearing portion of this. And I want to start with Gordon Stone. So Gordon, if you can come up, you have the unique position of not being an opponent or proponent. So I figured we just get that out of the way, and then we'll get into the back and forth.
Well, I wanted to sign up neutral, but there wasn't a blank. But first of all, I want to say thank you, senators, for the time, and also to Senator Barfoot for his inclusive way of engaging our institutions in the discussion. I stand here today, though, to tell you all that after meeting this morning for some time with our colleagues, I think there's some more issues we'd like to have the opportunity to discuss. So my real purpose for being here today is just to ask you all to make sure that we do have that, because we understand the goal here of trying to do good things and not do anything other than that. So we would like to be able to help with that as it relates to our institution. So thank you for that. We understand the complexities of this across the board, but also particularly as it relates to our institution. So thank you for including us. We would like to continue to be at the table. I know there's some conversations ongoing now, so hopefully we can take enough time to get it in its best form. So thank you very much for the.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. I think you'll find the sponsor to be pretty willing to speak with you and talk with you about whatever issue you might have.
He always has.
Thank you so much. Jerome Dees is next, and he is an opponent of the bill. Welcome to committee, sir.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. Before we begin, can we get some time parameters just so I know what we're working with?
You know, that's fair. I think about 3 or 4 minutes or something like that. We've got a number of people to get through. I want to give everybody as much time as they need. We do have that luxury today. We don't always have that luxury, so I'm appreciative of the scheduling that's happened. This is an important issue. So 3 is a good number to shoot for. But if you're really making some good points, I'm gonna let you keep going.
I'll try to keep it to 3, but hopefully I'm still making
Sounds good.
points.
Thank you, sir.
Again, my name is Jerome Dees. I'm the Policy Director for Southern Poverty Law Center located here in Montgomery, Alabama. And I'm here to speak against this bill for several different reasons, but I will narrow it down to 2 broad categories. First, I want to address some of the process concerns, just how the bill got here today. This bill was filed and showed up on Allison around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and we were diligently looking for it. At that time, CMG was posted on Allison as meeting, but there was no agenda that was presently posted. Immediately upon seeing that the bill had been filed, I'm aware of multiple public hearing requests that were placed. This morning, initially, there was no public hearing that was assigned to this bill. Now, of course, we are grateful for the opportunity to speak today, but I just did want to raise that concern on the record because, of course, we want to make sure that the public has the opportunity to speak on bills that are of interest to them. To the policy points, definitions are important. Definitions define the parameters around how we engage when we are dealing with specific legislation. And so I want to highlight just a couple of points in the definition section that are troubling. In section 1-2G, the definition around complicity is unclear. And what I mean by that is if a teacher is engaging in a subject around housing concerns and they start talking about the issues of housing in America, and a student is from the Levittown, New Jersey area, and they start learning about the GI Bill process and the provisions that were afforded to white Americans, but not to Black GIs. Does that child violate the provisions of complicity as the beneficiary of racist policies that are documented in this country? I think there needs to be more clarity around that. When we look at section 1-2I, founding principles, if a teacher begins to read letters or correspondence of the founding fathers and the letters back and forth between them around their views on slavery or some of the documents evidencing the trade that they engaged in around human chattel, is that in violation of founding principles? Now, when we look at the definition of direct or compel, section 2-2, when we talk about issues of banking as an example, and we look at the history of Reconstruction, When we talk about why we've gotten to where we are, it leaves some significant gray areas around what gets to direct or compel. And what I mean by that specifically is if a teacher is talking about a particular topic, like Levittown or banking or what have you, and they provide a test on that gets directly to racist principles, is it directing or compelling if a student then decides that, you know what, I don't want to believe that. And so they answer on a test otherwise and they receive a failing grade? Is that teacher directing or compelling that student to assent to those particular beliefs that are documented, that are historical, that are actual and factual? Practical application. When we look at the DEI provision, sections 1.3 and sections 2.1, in 2012 and 2013, I was the president of the Black Law Students Association at the University of Alabama. It's a public institution that's centered around the Black experience in the legal community. We engaged in many activities such as moot court and a host of other things. And a lot of our funding came from donors, but it also came directly from the university itself. Would groups like the Black Law Students Association or AAPI organizations or a host of others then be completely stripped? Finally, I want to close with concerns about Section 4.4. Section 4.4 gets directly at the idea of teaching or the allowing of the teaching of accurate factual history. That stands in contrast, based on the examples that I provided, with the host of the rest of the bill. Because when we teach history, what happened in the 1700s and 1800s in America and in Alabama, we also have to discuss the policy implications of the history that occurred, what naturally falls out from that. So either Section 4.4 actually has meaning and application in various educational institutions, or it's meaningless. So with that, I will allow the rest of the speakers to begin. Thank you so much
Mr.
for your
Dees.
time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next up, we have Tilford Earl. Am I saying that right? Yep, there we are. Good morning, sir. Welcome.
I am a retired history professor. I taught in a number of places, and history is very precious to me. Institutions of higher education are there to impart knowledge. And it is with knowledge that you gain understanding, and from that, hopefully, wisdom. And history is a very messy kind of subject. I like to grapple with these subjects. I became a historian after serving in the Air Force in Vietnam, and I came back and wrote 3 books on the air war in Vietnam. Since I was in the Air Force, what I had to say did not make me particularly popular. I later came back to Alabama to write a history of the university during the turbulent 1960s. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I was a student. I enrolled here 60 years ago this fall. That fall, President Frank Rose got the freshmen, and he said, I want to encourage you to make knowledge your mistress and impregnate your mind with the seeds of understanding. That might get him sent to some kind of sexual class today, I don't know, but it impressed me. And I went on from there to drop an art major and become a history major and go on to get a doctorate from George Washington University. I believe that this bill is needed to put the university back away from ideologically motivated history. Ideology has no place in history, but you can point to ideologies in history and gain a good deal of learning. I have myself taught histories of the Ku Klux Klan, a very complex history. There's not just one Ku Klux Klans, there are many Ku Klux Klans. And in fact, I worked for a while in this state as an informant on Klan activity for the FBI. I didn't go undercover or anything like that. I just reported on what I saw. I also have taught the history of the Holocaust, a horrible history. especially when you consider that when the Nazis were looking for race laws, guess where they looked? Alabama. They found Alabama's race laws so exclusive they couldn't use them in Nazi Germany. Because it's pretty easy to tell in Alabama whether one is black or white. Not so as to one's extent of Jewishness in Germany. So these are very difficult subjects. I was once in a Sunday school class in a Presbyterian church in which a pastor said, we're going to look at the very difficult topic of abortion. And he said, these are topics like you have to consider them prayerfully, thoughtfully, and in the eyes of God. I think that this bill is about as fair as you can get, but what I want to get back to is the importance of the pursuit of academic excellence, no matter where that takes you. And it should never constrain a professor from expressing from the facts those points of view, but you can get facts wrong. You're welcome to your opinion on how to interpret facts, but you are not welcome to have your own facts if they don't fit the factual record. And finding that factual record can be difficult. So I would be in favor of this bill because it does attempt to get us away from ideologically motivated perspectives when it comes to history. Thank you very much. I hope that you will pass this bill.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Richard Williams. Welcome, sir.
Hey, thank you so much. My name is Richard Williams. I serve as the lead pastor of Metropolitan United Methodist Church here in Montgomery, Alabama, as well as the executive director and founder of the Beacon Center, which is an 8,500 square foot of help serving over 19,000 households every single year. I stand here today as a servant serving my community and as an advocate for justice and understanding. As an advocate and as a voice to those who seek to build a more united and compassionate Alabama, I am here to express my strong opposition to Senate Bill 129, a piece of legislation that I believe undermines our efforts to foster a society where every individual is valued and respected. This bill seeks to silence important conversations that are essential for community healing and growth. By prohibiting discussions on topics that are deemed divisive, it restricts our ability to address complex issues that have shaped our history day after day and time after time. One of such issues is the historical connection between the United States and the reality of slavery and racism. This bill attempts to censor the truth while ignoring its ongoing impact on our communities today. We are still grappling with consequences time after time. As a pastor, I have seen the transformative power of an open dialogue in bringing people together to foster mutual respect. SB 129 threatens to halt this progress, pushing us into a state of denial and division. It's not just about restricting discussions on race. It's about denying the full breadth of our shared history and ongoing struggles of many who are in our community. In conclusion, I urge you to consider the broader implications of passing SB 129. It would signal that Alabama is choosing to close its eyes to the complexities of history and the realities of our current present day. As a voter, as a citizen of this state, I call on you to reject this bill. We must embrace our history, the fullness of our history, and the diversity and the joys and also the tears of it. Let us not censor the truths that are essential for growth and understanding. Let us continue to work together to build a state that truly values and respects all of its citizens. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Preachers always make the best orators, don't they? They're just good at it. Becky Garrison, you're up. Welcome.
Thank you. I just have three main points that I'd like to point out, and I'm not going to be real eloquent at this, but as you see on the top of your sheet, the concepts that are divisive really talk about race, color, sex, religion, ethnicity, national origin. These are things that a person can't change. These are things that they're born with. And when you judge people by these concepts, or you make them apologize for these concepts, it's very dehumanizing. And it's classifying people, by characteristics they can't help. I wish we could stop that. I wish we could come together and not blame people, and we judge people on their merits, on their character. So that's what this bill helps to do, and it stops the teaching of the blame and this kind of thing. The second thing, though, the more you teach these concepts, and we have all the studies that show this, the more money you spend on these concepts, the less inclusive and the less diverse you get. When Auburn ramped up their DEI programs, they have less minority students now. Troy spent 0 on DEI, and 32% of their population is Black. We see this all across the country. It's not just in Alabama. My third thing is just we're spending millions of dollars in the state of Alabama on programs that divide us, on programs that dehumanize us. And I would like to see that stopped. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrettson. Camille Bennett. Welcome.
Hi. Good morning. My name's Camille Bennett. I am the founder and executive director of Project Say Something, and I am an activist and a lobbyist. I've been doing this since I was 16 years old. The first policy that I fought for was to make it legal for us to have Black History Month at our school, Muscle Shoals High School. 30 years later, we see a bill that could wipe out state-funded DEI and censor Black history. I'm wondering how I got here again. How do a group of predominantly white men define divisive concepts? Were marginalized communities included in these definitions? Why does SB 129 choose not to explain why DEI is divisive? We still don't know the reason. You just said it's divisive and gave us some concepts that you came up with yourself. The bill itself is divisive when it attempts to control the way public institutions define slavery. Slavery literally predated the Declaration of Independence, and it took a bloody war to abolish slavery, which is literally the definition of a founding principle in the U.S. I'm gonna ask y'all one more time. This is my 3rd year up here. Y'all need to call it both ways. You fund Confederate monuments. You fund plantations. In my town, they had a plantation Christmas where they did not mention the over 100 bodies that built that building. The sons of Confederate veterans are welcome in our schools. Divisive concepts are subjective. You don't have the power to define them. So I humbly ask you to call it both ways, or the people will call it both ways. And believe me, the power still belongs to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Y'all, if we could keep down the clapping, I'd appreciate it. I understand your support for Ms. Bennett. That's fine. Just need to keep order if we can. Next up, we have John Herman. Welcome, sir.
I'm a retired professor at the University of Alabama, and I believe the people have spoken. The people have spoken that they don't like the way our education has been politicized. I see nothing in this bill that prevents the teaching of Black history, or as one senator said, it wipes out the Black race. I've seen histrionic objections, but nothing substantive that deals, other than the first speaker, who I would like to discuss with later, Mr. Dees, I've seen nothing in this bill that censors Black history. The Black history has been taught. Professor Tilford just said he taught about the Ku Klux Klan, that the Ku Klux Klan is evil. Yes, this is still going to be taught. Nothing stops this or prohibits it in the bill. Now, in your own mind or in history or in conversations with people, you may hear people talking that way, but this bill does not do that. I speak in reference to a couple of things. First of all, a STEM professor, untenured at the University of Alabama, when I was handing out fetal development pencils that showed the stages of fetal development, the baby in the womb, the fetus, the baby. And he said, if I accepted that pencil, I would be denied tenure at the University of Alabama. At the University of Alabama, there is an atmosphere of terror in regard to the free discussion of issues. If you're on the wrong side of any of these issues, you're held to be, for example, on the personhood of the fetus, you're held to be anti-woman. And as anti-woman, you will be punished. Similarly, there was a nurse in nursing school from Florida. She had to drop out. She dropped out because her teacher told her that the police regularly murder disabled people. She objected to this because her husband was a police officer and said, this is just wrong. She was given a definition of disability that was so broad, and she was punished. This occurs regularly in K through 12 and in our universities. You can't have a free discussion. The other side of the issue can't be advanced. The extent to which was slavery actually a founding principle of the founding of the United States? Was it a founding principle when the country was settled in 1619? This debate cannot be held frequently because of a censorship. If anything's being censored, it's academic excellence, the right of opposing views to be heard as they're being heard in this meeting, for which I commend you. This is quite wonderful, but this isn't something that can occur under a DEI regime that finds incorrect speech, politically incorrect speech, impermissible and punishes the people who utter it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the situation that I have observed and the threat to academic excellence.
Thank you, Professor. Next, Travis Jackson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Travis Jackson. I am a Black Lives Matter grassroots organizer, and I'm also a Iraq veteran. I fought for the freedom of all rights, and that includes the freedom to learn. And I strongly stand against SB 192. Black, Indigenous, and people of color have always had their voices erased from the beginning of time, ever since the Native Americans discovered America in 1492. Didn't say Christopher Columbus, I said the Native Americans. History, unfortunately, is continuously repeating itself today, centuries and centuries later. SB 192 is banning DEI concepts that need to be taught. The last time I checked, Black people are not divisive. Indigenous people are not divisive. People of color, that includes Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, are not divisive. LGBTQ people are not divisive, and people with disabilities are not divisive. This bill is saying that history is repeating itself. Just as the Nazis burnt books, banning DEI concepts is a similar tactic. Just as George Wallace stood in front of the University of Alabama doors to ban Black students from receiving education on June 11, 1963, banning DEI concepts as such is a similar tactic. Banning DEI concepts is racist, transphobic, misogynist, and ableist and ageist, and all other sorts of hatred and bigotry. This bill will allow our government to inhumanely prevent state colleges and schools from influencing a much safe and secure future for this state as well as this country. Banning DEI concepts is banning crime prevention, healthcare awareness, and that includes suicide prevention and other necessities that's needed for a much brighter democracy for our country. Last, SB 192 reveals this reality. Being Black in America is a full-time job with no days off without any vacation. Therefore, I strongly, not strongly, but staunchly oppose this racist and all sorts of hatred bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. John, gosh, I'm going to butcher this last name. If you could come and correct me before I just mess it up.
John Eidsmoe.
Okay.
I'm retired Air Force and an attorney who specializes in religious freedom issues, constitutional issues in general. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. Listening to many of the things that have been said about this bill, I'm not going to read the remarks that I gave you that are already passed out. Rather, I'm just going to respond to a few of these. We've heard a lot about how we can't be talking about Asians or LGBT or other races. We've heard the phrase erasing voices, banning concepts, censoring truth, silencing discussion. If that's what this bill did, I'd be against it too. But I have to say, as I read the bill, that's not what it does at all. And I would ask you, listen to the objections that are being given here, but then read the bill itself. And just to look at some of the language there, for example, Section 4 of this bill, which Senator Barfoot has already explained very clearly, but the bill provides ample protection for academic freedom. Section 2 provides for the right to respond to questions. Section 3A and B permit colleges to provide any instruction in furtherance of a academic accreditation standard. It permits teaching divisive concepts in an objective manner. Subsection 4 goes on to say that we may teach topics or historical events in an historically accurate context. Subsection 6 permits the promotion of racial, cultural, or ethnic diversity or inclusiveness consistent with the rest of the Act. And subsection 9 goes on to say that nothing in the Act may be construed to inhibit or violate First Amendment rights of students or employees to inhibit academic freedom. I commend Mr. Dees for the way he has actually analyzed the sections of the bill in particular there. I would say when you deal with some of these, you have to remember that on the one hand, if you make a bill too general, it's going to be vague. If you make a bill too specific, you're going to allow all sorts of rooms for exceptions. I think this bill draws a reasonable balance, and the questions that Mr. Dees has raised concerning the word complicity, for example, or using the letters of the Founding Fathers and so on, under the language we've seen about history, concerning academic freedom and the like, I think those are adequately covered. What we're really concerned here is not suppressing concepts. Rather, we're concerned about indoctrination in a particular ideology, an ideology that divides people into identity groups rather than measuring them on their individual worth, that teaches people to be ashamed of their race or of their heritage, and teaches hatred of their ancestors. That's what we're trying to prevent here. And I urge you to pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much. Okay, next up we have Destiny Clark. Is Destiny Clark here? Okay. Allison Montgomery.
Hey again. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Allison Montgomery of District 2, missing another day of work to be here, and I'm here to deliver the testimony of a UAB student who wanted to speak on this bill but couldn't make it today. Her name is Riley Raber of District 18, and here is her statement. Hello, my name is Riley. I'm a student at UAB and have been involved in several multicultural and diversity student organizations. They are organizations focusing on celebrating the diversity that is a hallmark of our campus, state, and country. They include a social organization that creates welcoming spaces for queer students, an organization that creates discussion events about topics related to social justice and societal issues, and a myriad of student associations of different cultures. UAB in particular has a trove of organizations such as the Vietnamese Students Association, Japanese Culture Club, and Black Students Awareness Committee. These are not programs that fit the definition of DEI outlined in the bill. They do not limit participation to only students of those demographics. As a white student, I have felt welcome at Black student-focused events and Middle Eastern student-focused events. Each organization frequently stresses that people of all backgrounds are welcome. Indeed, there is an incentive to welcome everyone, as the more people participate, the more successful they are. Despite not being what the bill defines as DEI programs, this legislation would undoubtedly put them at risk. The definition is vague enough that they could easily be mistaken for DEI programs by people who are ignorant of how they function. For many public institutions, it is not unlikely that they would rather shut down the organizations than put up with the potential controversy that could be generated. The programs that this bill claims to target do not exist. The vagueness of this bill means that the programs that would be targeted are ones that do nothing wrong. Indeed, the organizations do a great deal of good. They promote understanding between people of all races, backgrounds, gender identities, orientations, and age groups. Putting them at risk would lose a vital part of the college experience. Please vote against this bill, or at least consider taking more time with it.
Thank you very much. Our public hearing will conclude with our last speaker is Perry Scalfano. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Perry Scalfano, Senate District 7. I drove here from Huntsville this morning. I am not an executive director of anything. I am just a citizen who cares a lot about history. And I want to make sure that we have clear rules of engagement for educating our communities. First, a couple technical remarks. I really would like to address the woeful joinery of SB 129. I really think this is a bill unready for prime time. Lines 56 through 58 omit sex as a prohibited category for discrimination. That's obviously, you'll see. With lines 83 and 87 as well outlining a DEI program in such broad terms, I believe, of sex-based participation that I think, honestly, even women's book clubs or political organizations like the Republican Women of Madison County could be prohibited. I mean, as such, it's really difficult to see how protecting women-only spaces, which is a stated goal of a lot of legislation coming out this session, can be rationalized with this bill. In addition, there's a lot of language regarding that sort of speaks to the idea of biological sex that I think will conflict with other legislation that comes into effect in October, such as SB 92 or House Bill 130. There's also, I think, a kind of through line with some of the things we heard in hearings around Senate Bill 77, where we were told that defining history is sort of in the hands of the legislature. And I think that undermines the important history protections of this bill. I think that's a recipe for ineffective. I also would like to just address one statement from one of the professors who spoke. I did not catch his name. But on the idea that what former Professor Tilford had taught in the past was Black history. I just want to speak for the record that the Ku Klux Klan is not Black history, it is white history. And I think that that's pretty clear. That's exactly, frankly, what Black History Month has brought to my life, or in addition, programs that have been supported by those functions have illuminated the incredible depth of Black history in this state. Anyways, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scalfano. Okay, Senator Barfoot, if you kind of come back up, if you want to bookend this with any comments or closing remarks you have. I know there are some amendments that are some members that have proposed amendments that we're going to need to move through, and obviously we want to hear from the committee itself. So do you need time to say anything? Or?
Appreciate the time and attention that this committee has given to this matter, and these concepts are not new. As to the process being very quick. This process started 2 years ago. Members have had a chance to see it. So thank you, committee.
Thank you, Senator. So Senator Coleman.
I didn't know why you looking at me like that.
No, you're welcome and you're recognized. I do at some point we're going to have to get to the amendments.
I'm going to do all of it at one time if that's okay.
Suits me. Yeah. Now, Senator Coleman Madison's already passed me an amendment. If that's okay with you, she got the mic. We're going to let her run with it. Then we'll get to you. I promise.
Okay. I can yield to the senior senator. We're good? Okay, thank you. So I was listening, and I'm going to get to my amendment, but I just have to make a remark about a couple of things that I heard today. And one of the things that kind of, got to me was the statement that was made about feeling dehumanized. But if you feel dehumanized because you are called on your racism, that's a you thing. That has nothing to do with the people that you've offended. And so I had to call that particular comment out. Here in this legislative body, we actually need DEI training. In this body, I've had some incidents that have happened to me personally. I've been here for 22 years. And then when I'm looking out here, I'm seeing some of the same faces that we've had all session now, because this committee itself has been the hotbed for divisive concepts in this committee. But to me personally, one of the first incidents that I had was with Governor Bob Riley. I go into Governor Bob Riley's office, and I'm by myself, very young legislator at the time, and I'm talking to him about tax reform. He had a big tax reform measure at the time. When I get finished talking and making my presentation, Governor Riley says, "Oh, wow, you are so articulate." He said, "You and Congressman Arthur Davis are so articulate." And I said, "Governor, that's offensive." He said, "What do you mean?" I didn't mean it to be offensive. I thought, it was a compliment. I said, "What other white person have you walked up to them or said to them they're articulate?" I said, "When you say that to a Black person, it gives the perception that you think because I'm Black, I cannot speak the King's English." And he apologized. He truly did not mean to offend me. But that's why we need DEI training here. We had a colleague on the House side who sent out an email, and it was supposed to be a joke, and it was about some Democrats, and it had monkeys with bananas. It shut down the House of Representatives that day. He apologized also. He didn't realize the connotation to African Americans when you have monkeys. And we are attributed to that comment at all. Shut it down. First time we shut down, literally, we were singing "We Shall Overcome" on the floor of the House of Representatives. My very last session, the last night of me serving in the House of Representatives, another woman offended me. Microaggressions, mocked something I said on the floor, made fun of me on the floor in a body where I'm the equal, and that person was a brand new member. So we ourselves need DEI training in this body to make sure that we can truly be in community together. And so bills like this are hard. In this body, 140 members, only 35 African Americans. And even the fact that we have the bill today, I think it was, don't quote me on it, but I've heard this quote before that says something about just because you have power doesn't mean you have to wield it. And on Tuesday, of course, Senator Smitherman did an amazing job talking about this particular piece of legislation and how it makes us feel as Black people and members in this body. And then all of a sudden the bill was, we're in committee today. So there's some challenges there with even why the bill came here. Didn't have to wield the power just because you had the power. And I would just appeal to my colleagues that hug on us. We talk about our children. Some of us share offices together, that you think about your colleagues too when you write these pieces of legislation. So now on to my amendment. For many years before 2010, 2010 was the takeover for the Republicans. I actually served as chair of the Boards and Commissions Committee on the House side. We hadn't had any more African Americans chairs of any committee since 2010. But we worked really, really hard to diversify our boards and commissions, very hard. And it was a bipartisan effort of people recognizing that the boards and the commissions in the state of Alabama should reflect the population here in the state, but also the membership. So my amendment simply says, place line 198. Did I give you a copy, Mr. Chair? And this is to protect the work that many people did for many years. Howard Sandiford was who was my vice chair at the time, and then ended up after the 2010 session taking over as chair of boards and commissions. We kept this language to make sure that we kept these entities diversified. So it said, replace line 198 on page 8 with the following. None of these protected tenants conflict with this act. Number 10, shall be deemed to affect or revise any provision in state law requiring that membership of a state board, commission, or authority be inclusive and reflect the racial, gender, geographic, urban, rural, and economic diversity of the state, nor impact any public official appointed to a state board, commission, or authority as of October 1, 2024. This protects the work that we as a legislative body have done over many years, even as recently as last year. Even now, you serve on Sunset Committee right now. This is the language that we use currently, and I'm asking the committee to keep the language that we've used since the last 22 years I've been here, and we keep diversifying or keep the diversity in our boards and commissions. That makes those boards and commissions better.
Will the lady yield for a procedural question? Have you provided a copy of this amendment to the bill sponsor?
I have not.
Okay, I'm going to do that real quick and get him to take a look at it.
Thank you.
And yeah, do you have copies for the members?
I actually thought copies were going to be provided for the members, but you all can have my copy.
Okay. So let's see if we can get some copies of that. And Senator Coleman Madison, while we're at it, do you have copies for everybody for your amendment? Okay, we're going to do that too. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. And members, what we're going to do is we're going to get copies so that you can look at each one of those and consider both of those amendments. Thank you for yielding. I just want to make sure the members know what they're voting on, and I appreciate being able to interrupt you for that. And you can continue on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And normally, of course, we would have had a bill, and just this is really for the public. Normally, we wouldn't have had a bill that would have posted at 4 p.m. the night before, so we would have had time to even have a discussion. This is also one of those days that the senator who is sponsoring this legislation, this kind of happens with us as well. Earlier today, we were kumbaya, and I thanked him for the support of a piece of legislation that I had in judiciary. Now we're at the opposite end, to where I don't know if you could clean this bill up at all, but I do also know the posture of this body. So I want to make sure that we put something on there that protects the work that we've already done. And just as I close, Ms. Chair, I wanted to share just a little bit about my own background. So I'm a military brat. My dad served 22 years in the United States Air Force, and I thank God for that upbringing. So I was actually born in England. And I remember we were living on Alconbury Air Force Base, and when you want to talk about the diversity of the people you live around. So of course we're a Black family. Next door to me we had my friend. His mom was Japanese and his dad was Mexican. I don't think I've ever seen that again. On the other side, I think we had a biracial Black and white couple, but it was that level of diversity. I mean, I had friends that were Filipino, Korean, and I had the best upbringing and the best food because, being able to have those friendships and being in each other's home, that made me a more well-rounded person. Bills like this that we have before us they're gonna impede the progress of our young people. They're gonna impede the progress of our young people learning about other folks and other cultures. It makes us a better society, not a worse society. And here in the bill, when it talks specifically, I was waiting on somebody to use the word indoctrination. And I'm filibustering until we get everything, but I was waiting on that word indoctrination because I was waiting on it. I teach. I still teach. I've been teaching for my daughter's 26 years old, for the past 20-something years. And I don't know who is indoctrinating students. in an institution of higher education, and I teach at an HBCU at the African American College, where I do have diversity in my students. I have white students, I have other students that also are part of the HBCU. And as a Black professor that teaches political science, one of the things that I talk about from the very beginning, I'm a partisan, but in the institution of higher education, I welcome all thoughts. We have lively discussions. Some of the best discussions that I've ever had have been on policy issues where we disagreed. It makes us a better society to hear competing thoughts, not a worse society. It makes us a better society to learn about other people's history and background and other racial cultures, not a worse society. And if you feel bad about what your ancestors did, that's because they did wrong, not because somebody is trying to make you feel bad. It just is what it is. It is the history of this country. And I hate these types of legislation that are going on. When I was hearing Mr. Deeds talk about his organization with the law school students and the young lady that talked about the multicultural organizations, my fear is that they're going to go away. And then we will have a society or a student body that really doesn't have the opportunity to learn about other folks. And when they don't, and they're competing globally, when I even think about our business students, when they're competing globally, it will be our fault that they're not prepared to understand and work with other cultures.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Senator Barfoot, if you could come back to the mic. And members, you should have an amendment in front of you now. Is that correct, Clerk? Everybody's got Senator Coleman's? We're coming. Okay, we're coming. We got copies, we're just make sure we're staying organized here. So the amendment ends in 151-1 at the top. So which will make sure everybody's on the same page. Senator Barfoot, you've had an opportunity to look at this amendment. Could you, as the bill sponsor, could you comment on it?
Sure. Valid concerns, unintended consequences, and I think Senator Coleman's language clears that up. So supportive of that amendment.
So Senator Coleman's going to move to adopt the amendment.
Yes, thank you.
And I have a second from Senator Coleman Madison. Clerk, if you would call the long roll on adoption of the amendment.
Senator Albritton, Senator Carnley, Senator Coleman,
Aye.
Senator Gudger, Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Kelly, Senator Coleman Madison, Senator Chambliss, Senator Elliott,
Okay, the amendment is adopted. The Senator Coleman amendment is adopted. Senator Coleman Madison, you're recognized to explain your amendment.
Thank you, sir. But first of all, I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
For Senator Barfoot. Senator Barfoot, when you put this together, and you said that you've been working on this for a long time, what was your original intent?
Well, it started off when you see and hear what has happened, allegedly has happened at the very least in schools, where divisive concepts as listed in the bill have been forced upon people. The intent was certainly not to, nor do I believe it does, prohibit the teaching of any specific type of history. I would say that it, to the contrary, it allows, and I would say from an academic freedom standpoint, goes to almost mandating the curiosity that one of the speakers spoke about before.
So coming from an educational standpoint, I'm assuming that this is where these incidents happen, correct?
Yes, and you've seen other states certainly that have passed similar legislation for things that have gone on there. There have been no unintended consequences in those states that I'm aware of.
Okay. I'm wondering though, why would this not go to the State Board of Education and have a statewide ruling? You follow me?
I do, and great point. And actually, and I should have jotted the date down. I think the State Board of Education actually did address some of those divisive concepts by rule, and have done by rule what this intends to do by statute. And you, of course, know that rules can be changed a lot easier than statutes can. So this certainly just gives that, puts it into statute format rather than rulemaking format at the State Board of Education.
I kind of look at it as far as when we make something a state law, and laws are hard to change. Yes, it's easier to change rules, but if it is a rule, and everybody's been passed out those rules and regulations, you have the options of keeping that person on or firing them for violations thereof.
And this legislation addresses that as well. It specifically has the procedural due process and safeguards in place under current law so that no individual could be fired or terminated any differently than if some other act outside of the confines of this divisive concept legislation occurred. So,
okay, let me just come at this from a different perspective. I did have some concerns about some of the comments that some of the speakers made, but for me, when we put something in law, and I know this is not your intent, I don't believe it's your intent, that it creates a fear environment. We passed other laws that had unintended consequences. Doctors afraid, and still afraid, to provide medical care for people who need it. We wanted to pass something about this conscience bill that we had, that based on my conscience, if I don't like, and it's related to what we are doing right now because we're talking about classes of people, LGBTQ and other people, but if I don't like you or my religious values or whatever, you, as a doctor, a medical professional, you went into that profession and your job is to heal, to cure, to do no harm. But based on my religious conscience, if I have some affinity for a certain class of people, then I don't have to serve you. When you go into a hospital and you have a continuum of service, they send you from one department to the other to have tests or what have you. And so you get there and you've got one doctor that says, no, I'm not going to wait on them because they the way they dress, the way they look, you know. So all I'm saying is that when we put things into law, it created a fear, and that fear is still there. This unintended consequences, I'm mighty afraid, is going to do that, where people are not going to be certain about what I can and what I cannot teach, because our laws tend to be very vague. The other thing is that when we talk about on higher ed and universities, I attended back here in May the Chinese festival on May 22nd, and it was held over at UAB. There are other cultural, ethnic groups that hold the same type of thing. I mean, it is a metropolitan, a cosmopolitan of different diversities, and they have all, I just think it's just a wonderful thing. I love travel. I love meeting people all over the world. It gives me an opportunity when I'm there to tell them, when they say, where are you from? And I tell them about Alabama. And hopefully to give them a different view of who Alabama is, what we are like, not necessarily what you've seen on television, the dogs, the hoses, you know, that's what they see. But sometimes when we pass legislation, it also sends another message. Now, I'm going to come at this from an economic standpoint because I don't think you all even thought about this. We are out every day recruiting foreign business. There are some of you around this table probably been to the air show in Paris. That's a recruitment thing, I think. Of course, I'm sure you had a lot of fun. But it's supposed to be an economic recruitment trip. We have Mercedes, Hyundai. Who else we got here? Who? Toyota. All foreign. They bring their people here. They bring their families here. They transport people from there to work. I know when Mercedes, because I interviewed for a job there at a particular time when they first came here, got really nice people. And because of all of this mingling of cultures and people coming here, they have a different perspective of Alabama, but we keep showing them the bad, the ugly. Again, I think we are going to be sending a negative message when it comes down to this, because all of those people come from a different culture. And I don't know, I'm hoping, do you plan to try to get this bill up on the floor tomorrow?
I certainly hope that I have that ability.
Well, I would respectfully ask that you give us some time to kind of go through it again. I do have an amendment, and maybe make some other, because the gentleman brought up a very good point that here you did not include sex. On page 3, line 58, you talked about race, color, religion, ethnicity, national origin. You did not say sex. I love public television, and that was a great documentary on it about not American Airlines, but airline stewardess. It particularly spoke to white women because that's who first went into it. And the discrimination that those women went through and how they just had to fight based on sex. If you get a chance, look it up, pbs.org, and look that and watch it. Because civil rights and the whole 9 yards of diversity and everything we talked about, that helped those women get their rights to a lot of things. But I would just ask that if you give it time, because I'm sure you have your votes. And there are certain aspects of this bill that I can understand. I just want to make sure that when we leave here, everybody understand what it is not. I do not want to send the wrong message to the world that we are out recruiting to come to Alabama. And I don't want people to come here and misinterpret who we are and what we're about. So I do have an amendment that, and the chair has it.
Members, the Coleman-Madison amendment is in front of you, and it ends in SQQ1, and she was kind enough to put her name at the top of it, so we know whose work it is. So.
I did give it to a sponsor of the bill, which basically removes lines 121 through 124. And I've explained, as I explained to you, it seems to contradict where you say that you cannot apply for federal grants or private grants. It removes that language that bans or bars you from any grants from a program. I mean, why wouldn't you be able to use, even if it's private? I mean, but then in another section, you said that you can have these programs, but you cannot. I don't understand.
Be glad.
So Senator Barfoot, you've seen the amendment. I know we're throwing a lot at you here quickly, but you're a quick guy on your feet. If you could just let the committee know kind of what you think about the amendment and what Senator Coleman-Madison's offered.
I actually had them reversed, so I had Senator Hatcher's name on your amendment, but I have read and understand that yours is removes line 121 through 124. I don't think that's a friendly amendment. I will certainly work with you to the degree that you have any concerns about what that portion of the bill does. It does not prohibit grants, funds, private funding of any type, except for those for the purposes of compelling assent to a divisive concept. So, certainly free to explore the options of federal funding or accept a grant or private funding. It doesn't touch anything except for if the purpose of that grant or funding is to compel, to make somebody assent to a divisive concept.
All right, thank you for clearing. Again, that's why I say it's very important that when we leave here, and I do understand what you meant at that point now, so I will.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
And I would agree with you, if I could, I would agree with you that the more diverse that we are, I had an opportunity to go to the Soviet Union a long time ago when I learned so much by being around people who were not like me. That's an advantage to us, and I agree with that. And I would say that this bill in general is not an attempt to silence anybody. It's to one of the speakers that was a proponent of it, it's an attempt to make that academic freedom so that we can discuss. There's no provision in here that says that students cannot discuss these topics on their own or outside the confines on their own time. So,
and I hope that we will, the first speaker that from Southern Poverty Law Center, he brought up some points.
Professor Dees.
Yes, and I hope that you will, that's why I'm asking that we not put this on tomorrow, if that's at all possible, to try to clear whatever that is up. I was trying to follow along, but some of the points, as I looked through here, I had already flagged the same points that he was making.
Okay, thank you, Senator Coleman-Madison. So members, just procedurally, we didn't have a motion or a second on that amendment, and the senator has withdrawn.
But let me ask you one last question.
Yes, ma'am, of course.
You had or, well, you said it doesn't ban, well, it if you use it for a divisive concept, but you had the word or.
What line number are you on, Senator?
I'm on line 123.
Thank you.
For compelling assent or divisive concept or any other purpose prohibited by this or any other purpose.
Right, is outlined through the DEI programs.
Okay. I just want to be clear.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm still just on the amendment that Senator Coleman Madison had. I'm still, and I hear you to the sponsor of the bill. I'm still afraid, though, that having that section in is going to conflict with Section 4, where you told us already that we're not preventing anybody that can do those things as long as no state funds are being used. But yet her amendment, I felt, would have cleared up being able to use those additional funds. That's what I'm afraid of, that we actually still need that amendment to not conflict with your Section 4.
If I could suggest, and I don't know the wording, wouldn't know the wording off the top of my head, but Senator Coleman Madison's amendment deleted 4 lines. It may be that there's some language or exceptions or language to clear up that would be acceptable without deleting those 4 lines. So I'll be glad to listen to you.
I'll get with you and we'll work out something, and then I'll come back with another amendment.
Okay.
Thank you both very much. That's how this should work. Okay, Senator Hatcher. You're recognized, and ladies and gentlemen, you've got an amendment before you that ends in CC61. That's the Hatcher Amendment. Senator Hatcher.
Rarely am I speechless. I'm going to get to the amendment. But I'm just tired. This has been going on now since the session began, and I saw people exiting this room yesterday in tears, and I did not run for office for this. And I'm praying about a letter that I penned to resign from the Senate because I can't do things like this. My mother said to me last night, she apologized for what I said yesterday. I said, Mama said that, I thought we fought these battles already. My mother will be 82. Thank God she's in good health. And I moved back home in order to I'm an only child, and to continue to look after my mama. And so when she said to me on last evening, Senator Barfoot, to offer an apology for, I guess, not completing the work that she remembers, and the folk who come by her shop who are proud of her son. It makes it really challenging. I believe T.S. Eliot was the one who said something to the effect that that there is no greater treason than to do the right deed for the wrong reasons. For those who don't know, Senator Barfoot is my friend, and will always be. This legislation just offends me deeply. I'm trying to see where is the need for that. This barrage of legislation that I've seen that seeks to exacerbate divisions rather than nurture and build on our rich diversity. How are we crafting legislation? We all know the needs of the people in the state of Alabama. We know what those needs are. I paid attention to the people who came up who are in support of the bill. You were all non-melanated folk. You say to us, this idea of diversity should not necessarily mean I'm an educator. For God's sake, don't gaslight me. Cultural Marxism. I was at Harvard. I was there between 1989 and 92, and Derek Bell and 8 other members, Kimberly Crenshaw and others, we're talking about the notion of critical race theory. People use this language, and you don't even know what it meant and what the spirit of that was. It's very simple, really. It's very simple. He couldn't understand, the committee could not understand, and that included a gentleman who is a professor at the University of Alabama now. In fact, I invite you to get his book, Richard Delgado, and the other author. He talks about critical race theory. And one of the things that he said is we couldn't understand why we have laws in the books, but yet we are still engaged in discriminatory practices, that we still are engaged in discriminatory practices. So how do we do? What do we need to do about that? And the thing that came up was, how, in God's name, can we get ourselves to a point in place in this country, this great country, where somehow or the other, we would be able to get to a place where we wouldn't require things like this notion of divisive concepts, which I'm still working really hard to understand because of the respect for the sponsor. But I'm looking also at a line here from Mr. Eadsmo. It says, our schools and state agencies should not promote an ideology that teaches children and others to hate their ancestors and to be ashamed of their country, that divides children from their parents and from each other, and that indoctrinates people to define themselves by identity groups instead of as a free and equal individuals created in the image of God. Created in the image of God. I think the one last thing I would offer is this. Nicholas Confessor says, in late 2022, a group of conservative activists and academics set out to abolish the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at Texas public universities. And they linked it up with a former aide to the state's powerful Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, who made banning DEI initiatives one of his top priorities, setting their sights on well-known scholars in well-known schools like Texas A&M. They researched which offices and employees should be expunged. A well-connected alumnus conveyed their findings to the A&M chancellor. The former Patrick aide cited them before a state Senate committee. The campaign quickly yielded results. In May of 2023, Texas approved legislation banning all such programs from public institutions of higher learning. And to skip forward, gathering strength from a backlash against Black Lives Matter and fueled by criticism that doctrines such as critical race theory had made colleges engines of progressive indoctrination. The eradication of DEI programs has become both a cause and a message suffusing the American right. In 2023, more than 20 states considered or approved new laws taking aim at DEI, even as polling has shown that diversity initiatives remain popular. So this is what I call boilerplate legislation. This is not new. And the ending point before this amendment that I would offer is we know in our most reverential moments that we cannot turn the clock back to where it was. But we do shrink, I think, from the disengagement because we have confused a mere ideological expedience with loyalty to a way of life that, if it ever was, can never be again. And so what it does is these notions hold all of us captives. It just does. And I will say that I'm very acquainted with power. When I lived in Westport, Connecticut, individuals that I interacted with, strangely enough, a little poor kid from Montgomery, Alabama, were individuals whose wealth was astronomical and who are real serious funders of entities like the Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, all of these groups. Very, very powerful. Real powerful. One such person, who at the time, 5 years ago, was worth at that time $12.5 billion. Fined by SEC, and he simply had a cashier's check drawn for $1.4 billion to pay it, and then bought a $64 million, another $64 million home on the Hamptons, and managed to get, he's a collector of Pablo Picasso's works, managed to collect a painting at the bargain basement price of $117 million. They were funding initiatives like these, dividing good people. My hope is that we will do better. I respect every member of this body. I would never do anything that would in any way create a division for any of your children, your families. I've taught a lot of our young people who are in government here. I want them to see us do better. And I don't see how this does this. But I do have this amendment. And you all just know, just hit the floor. You know, Senator Smitherman and Senator Singleton won't be the only ones at the mic. The hopefully friendly amendment that I'm offering on page 4, lines 97 through 100. Senator Barfoot, it's stating sponsor any diversity, equity, and inclusion program or maintain any office, physical location, or department that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. What I'm seeking to do with this one is remove language that bars sponsoring of DEI programs, offices, physical locations, and departments. More specifically, we have the positive distinction in this state of the governor having an office, minority affairs. And so my concern with this amendment would be to keep that office.
So, Senator Barfoot, you've heard Senator Hatcher's amendment. If you could tell the committee your thoughts after you've had a chance to review it.
First of all, before I get on the committee amendment, let me address.
Certainly.
A lot of times we throw around the word friend, and we do it. He's my friend. She's my friend. When Senator Hatcher says friend, he means it. And I reciprocate in that. He is my friend. Regardless of what happens with this bill, regardless of what happens tomorrow, the next week, the following week, regardless of political ideology, fan or friend base, objectors, proponents or opponents of ideology, He is my friend. I'll scream that from the mountaintop. That's the truth because I know the man's heart. It's not political aspiration he seeks. It's not political points somewhere. It's his heart. And quite honestly, that's the reason that this bill is so difficult, is because what others see as problems or potential problems, I don't see that. Certainly not the intent. And to the extent that the amendment tries to clear up, Senator Hatcher, you said the minority office within the governor's office, so I don't know the formal, we may be able to work on some language with that. I don't find this strike of those 4 lines as acceptable. I will say that I had those conversations based on some concerns with the legal staff here at LSA, and they did not believe that that in any way, shape, or form would affect not only that office, but other offices that I'd had some concerns with or heard some concerns about.
Okay, let me deal with Senator Hatcher's amendment real quick, or just ask him how he'd like to proceed given the response from the sponsor. Or if you just want to think about it, we'll take Senator Coleman Madison's question and come back to you.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what are we accepting that? Are we going to talk about?
I would like to the extent that your concern is that it eliminates some office at the governor's office dealing with minority. Right. We can come up with some language to make sure that that does not happen. I've talked to the legal folks in LSA and understand that this in no way would touch that as it is. If there needs to be some additional assurances, we can certainly put that.
It sounds like we need to circle back.
Well, and we can.
Happy to do that. Maybe we can go talk to the legal folks down there, let them explain from the legal side, and if we still think there or needs to be some assurances there, put in the language that it would not affect it. I think that is a friendly amendment if we can get to that point, because that is not the goal or intent. So.
Okay. Very good. Senator Coleman Madison.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to give you an example. I worked for Red Cross for years, and of course, we do national and international disaster services. I became a national Red Cross diversity trainer because in that association or organization of trying to give relief and assistance to people who are not like us, you go into foreign countries, and we adopted this thing, you know, we say, treat people like you want to be treated. That's not the case when you work in a disaster. You treat people like they want to be treated. You may be trying to offer somebody a bed where they used to sleeping on a cot. And the reason I say this is because we have so many instances in our agencies, with our boards, and law enforcement, where sensitivity training, diversity training is really needed. If I live in a homogeneous community, all Black people, I may not understand what the white community goes through, and vice versa. That's why I make it a deliberate attempt to gravitate toward people who are different from me, cultures that are different, and I want to understand them. We kind of dropping the oil in the water. You know, you have to drop of oil in the water, it just kind of moves away. We should not be. This country was created as a melting pot. I don't know why Alabama is still trying to separate itself out. It's happening. And we need to embrace it because we understand it's our diversity that makes us stronger. And so the reason that I would be supportive of Senator Hatcher's amendment and not changing it simply because if you want to just carve out the Governor's Office of Minority Affairs, you have left out all the other agencies that are out there serving the public that deal with all of these different diverse populations, and we don't have any sensitivity about them. We don't have any sensitivity about who they are. We don't have any diversity training about their culture and how they should be treated. And that's all we're saying. You know, don't expect me, you know, you and I grew up differently. And you're trying to help people, but you maybe trying to give them something that's not the service. Give you an example, and I don't know if it's a good example, but we were doing disaster service in Puerto Rico, and they had gotten this large shipment of cookies that were called bimbos. And we wonder why we could not get rid of the bimbos. And finally asked one of my friends that was there and who was Puerto Rican, he says, because that's derogatory toward the women. Because, it's a derogatory thing even in America, but, they would not take the bimbos, so we had stacks and stacks of bimbos. Again, you need to understand the culture. You need to understand people. We may be trying to help, and as a governmental entity trying to help people, we need to have diversity. We need to have diversity training. That's where I'm trying. And so.
One last, I promise you, miss, I promise you.
Thank you, Senator Coleman Madison. I needed that.
Me too.
Senator Coleman, you're recognized.
And thank you, Senator Coleman Madison, because I've kind of been on 10 this whole committee meeting, so you helped me so much there. But to the sponsor of the bill, something just happened while Senator Hatcher was pouring out his heart to all of us that I think is going to be a major challenge to your bill. And I just want you to think about it. While he was pouring his heart out, one of the speakers got up and left. One of the people who came to speak in support of this bill, while this man was pouring out his heart, got up and left on this senator while he was speaking. I went out there because I saw he was hot when he went out. So I wanted to see what was going on. And I said, and he said, what he said was offensive. What Senator Hatcher simply said was that everybody who spoke in support of this legislation was unmelanated. That's a fact. That wasn't an opinion. It was a fact. What I'm afraid of with your bill is that somebody's going to lose their job. Something's going to happen because of somebody's opinion, not anything based on fact. And I just want you to think about that moving forward on this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Okay, committee, we are in a position with one of the amendments adopted, that's Senator Coleman's amended, and that's been adopted. And so now I'm looking for a motion for, I have a motion, well, just to be clear what we're motioning, I want to make sure, Senator Coleman has, this is a motion for favorable report as amended. So I have a motion by Senator. We haven't adopted the Coleman amendment? We didn't offer the amendment. Yeah, okay. So we've adopted the Coleman amendment, so and this is on favorable report of the bill as amended. I have a motion by Senator Kelly. Do I have a second? I have a second by Senator Chambliss. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Albritton, Senator Cornley, Senator Coleman.
No.
Senator Gedger, Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Kelly, Senator Coleman Madison, Senator Chambliss, Senator Elliott.
Aye. Okay, 7-3, the bill receives a favorable report. Thank you to the sponsor. Thank you, committee, and we're adjourned.